All right, guys, welcome back to Uncaught Exceptions. Today we have two special guests. Feel free to introduce yourselves. Scott, you can go first.
My name is Scott Hanselman, and I work at Microsoft, and I've been on the internet since it was invented. And now I'm on TikTok, which is concerning because I'm old and we're not supposed to go there.
I'm Jess. I also work at Microsoft. I've been on the internet since I was born in 1996, and I'm on TikTok, and I feel old, but I'm not as old as Scott.
And use the internet right when you were born?
Okay, maybe not. I don't remember when.
Is that dial up? Or you just like write out, you're like, get me online.
I used the internet when I started playing Neopets. That's the first time I remember using it.
Oh, okay.
Well, that answers the question I had. One of the questions I had for both of you. Well, for Jess, what was your first like encounter with computers and programming? But you just answered that.
That's a good question to start with. Actually, I want to hear more about Jess's first experience with computers.
With computers and programming, I'll answer the programming part because I actually weirdly found that this was a shared experience after being on the internet for a few years. But apparently a lot of people's first experience with coding was like on Neopets. There's basically there was this thing that went around where you could change the homepage of your shop and your like Neopets to be like different colors and different patterns. And it was my first experience with HTML and CSS, except at the time I didn't know it was HTML and CSS. I just knew I was on a hacky page, copy pasting things into my web page to make it pretty. And I thought I was the only person, but then like I've heard so many other people having the same experience and that being their first time like coding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the first memory I have. It's Neopets.
Everyone kind of started with HTML and CSS, right? Because my first time was when I had a MySpace. I thought I was so cool, like messing with the code to like make things like different sizes on all that. So that was my first time. So I guess it's all in the same era.
Yeah.
HTML and CSS didn't exist when I started, but we had an Apple II. And before that, we had what was called a TRS-80 or a Trash 80. And we had, it was from Radio Shack. And you would get a printer. Remember the printers that go, and it had like paper that was like with little dots, little holes on the side.
Yes.
And you would put them on the little spikes and the spikes would turn and it would turn the paper. So you'd have reams and reams of paper that was all serrated. And we didn't have printers that could print pictures. So instead, we would print letters, and then you step really, really, really far away from it, and then you kind of squint, and it would look like a picture. So I was at my mom's house a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, "Hey, I found this in the garage," and she hands me this reams of paper. And if you go like 5 pieces of paper by 5, and you have like 25 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, there's a picture of Mr. Spock that I made in like 1984 on this Trash 80, and it took like, I don't know, 3 days to print, you know, just like,
oh my God.
That's crazy. Yeah, now there's like packages you can just use that's just image to ASCII or whatever. So I was just messing around with that on TikTok. I actually made a video about it.
Is that one of the GitHub repos you found?
It's just a brew library or whatever.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I saw somebody make a thing that was in real time, and it was a shader that would turn Doom into real-time ASCII art. So you play like 60 frames a second Doom as ASCII.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah, apparently, what's it called? VLC can do that on the fly.
Yeah.
Do
you all, are any of you old enough to remember, or have you seen any of the documentaries about BBSs, bulletin board systems?
No.
Do you know what a BBS is? You ever heard that word before?
I thought you meant DDoS.
So if back in the day, before the internet, there was a thing called FidoNet. And if I wanted to send Krystal an email, my computer would call another local computer. Let's say it was a little farther east, not so far that it's a long distance phone call, which was a thing. But let's say that I'm in Portland and I call 200 miles east, it's local call. I would send computer to computer the email, and then that computer would call Boise, and then that computer would call Montana, and it would bounce its way across the country, and it would take about a day and a half to get an email in batches. So I would call a local person, and then they would call a local person, and then a couple of days later you'd get the email. And we were doing it to save long distance phone calls.
The patience you guys had. Jesus.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like,
holy.
Yeah, we're mad nowadays if a page doesn't load for 2 seconds. You know?
Oh yeah,
like,
I'm done.
like, this is so slow.
I literally leave the website if it doesn't load right away.
I think it's so interesting that the new expectation of like what's fast and what's acceptable. Like I've got this new iPhone, and I was so excited about 5G. 5G is trash. It doesn't work anywhere. Yep. It's not awesome. Like I'm ending up turning off 5G because LTE will give me better. Yeah. Like, I'm watching Netflix in 4K on an iPhone. I'm like, this is too slow. It's buffering. Ugh. We would wait a day to see one GIF.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is insane.
And then there were the GIF wars. Do you know that there was the GIF wars? There was 2 formats. Like there was GIF 87 in 1987, and then there was GIF 89 and CompuServe.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
Google the GIF wars. So CompuServe was a way to get internet. You'd call AOL or CompuServe, and that was your dial-up, right? And you would CompuServe owned the patent on GIFs. And anyone who says GIF is a bad person. And you would they wanted to charge everyone money to make a GIF. So people were like, that's not, we're not going to pay that at all. So there was like a whole fight about what the format was going to be and whether and then they just gave up and gave it to the people.
Imagine if they had won.
That's good. Yeah, it's like,
imagine.
Well, I feel like no one would have used it, right? Like even if they did win, like who's going to pay for 30 seconds of enjoyment, you know, like I don't know.
30 seconds. GIFs were actually 2 or 3 frames because we didn't have enough bandwidth. So it wasn't like you'd watch a whole movie in a GIF. It just be like,
it just flip back and forth. Okay.
And
Gotcha.
Do you know that, I'm sorry to be the old man on the podcast, but do you know that GIFs that you upload to and watch on Twitter are not GIFs?
No, what are they?
They're MP4s.
Oh.
Oh.
So when you go on Giphy.
So they're just straight up videos.
Yeah.
They're videos because videos and MP4, which is one better than MP3, are really highly compressed, and GIFs are just frames. It's not efficient. It's very inefficient. Like, so the MP4, so all of the uploading GIFs and sharing GIFs and stuff and going on Giphy, it's all lies. It's actually little tiny movies that you're doing. And they only make it a GIF when you want to download it and look at it.
Yeah, and then they break it up into frames. Okay.
Yeah. That does make sense though for like their storage too.
Yeah, plus it's more fun to say GIF.
It's more fun to say GIF.
I've learned so much in the past.
In the last 5 minutes, I got
4 different ways.
In 5 minutes, we got a history of the internet.
Like imagine if GIF wasn't a thing now because of that. You know,
there were people trying to make motion PNG a thing. Like PNGs in motion was going to be a thing. There was a time when we had interlaced GIFs where they would send you, it was loading so slow and you would watch the GIF load like this.
Oh.
So somebody was like, I'll just send you lines 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then I'll come back and then I'll do the even numbers. So you would watch the GIF load and then the second interlaced part would load.
Yeah.
But this is an interesting.
That's actually pretty interesting.
Thank you.
Imagine like giving a person, like imagine a person and giving them this as an interview question. Like if you were like design, or how would you, like assuming you don't actually know how GIFs are done, right? Like how would you design it, and then seeing if they hit upon like solutions that were thrown away in the past. Like that's so cool, right? When you think about what you use daily now, but then realizing that there was like, just like you approach solutions now to problems, like people had these solutions that they probably thought were good at the time, right? And then we laughed them off because we're like, oh no, that's like stupid. But then like, you know, it's only stupid because we don't use it. Like we know what the correct answer is. But that's so cool, like to think about how these things are actually like built back in the day.
One of the things that's interesting or kind of cool about being a little bit older is the historical context. But what I think is really important for older people to know, and for me to do as an elder or geriatric millennial, if you will, is use that information for good and empowering, and to get people like Jess is like, that's cool. But to share it in a way that isn't gatekeeping. Like, you're not a programmer unless you know this obscure fact that only an old person would know.
Yeah.
So I really like interview questions where you're like, well, how do you think HTTP would work? And then they think it's like a trivia question. It's like, no, not like, just design it. Like, how would you do it? How do you think this works? So my favorite interview question is, you go to a browser, you type google.com, you press enter, what happens? And they'll usually freak out. They're like, I don't know that much of the stack. And I'm like, no, but what do you think happens? And people can usually figure out DNS, and they can usually figure out stuff, but everyone's different in how they decide to look at the stack. And one time I had this guy say, you push enter and like the metal on the enter key touches the metal on the bottom of the keyboard.
Oh, you went that fundamental.
I just wanted to know about like F12 tools. But he was all like in the quantum realm trying to send electrons across the web. But that's super cool, right? He didn't even get like through the cord, and like think about like Bluetooth and a USB and keyboards before anything happened. That's super cool to like study that stuff.
It's a good indication of seeing what he himself was interested in too.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
That is I would probably freak. By the way, I really hope that is never asked of me. But like,
yeah, no, I would freak out.
Hearing those stories,
please don't.
Well, why would you
want to have to answer that?
Why would you freak out?
I don't know what to answer. I don't know what to answer.
Yeah, that's something you throw in there if you like completely want to throw the person off, because that would freak me out.
I never want to throw people off. I want people to be excited about digging one level deeper than they usually dig.
Yeah.
I guess doing it on the spot would be.
Oh yeah, you warn them. You absolutely have to tell them like the day before to think about it. But I want to hear people like, okay, you're driving your car and then the tire pops. What do you do?
I feel like for those okay, I actually think this is a good point, because if I got that question, like you're driving a car and your tire pops, I would love to answer that question. But for some reason, as soon as it gets into tech and something that I know has already been solved and that you know the correct answer to, and I don't necessarily have to answer, but like there is technically a correct answer, as soon as that happens, I'll freak out. Okay. Like I will answer any question that's not tech related, but for some reason, as soon as it's like interview question related to tech, I'll just
So let me throw something out at you, Jess.
Imposter syndrome.
So Jess, let's talk about that for a second. You've done like HTTP stuff, like you've written JavaScript to call an HTTP like web service or something, right? Okay. Yeah. And do you know what an HTTP referrer is? Like when like it tells you the page that referred you to this page. It's HTTP refer. It's like if you visit a page, you can look at the referrer and see the page before you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's spelled wrong in the spec. Like they spelled the word referrer wrong, and it's 2020 and it's always going to be wrong forever for all of history. The HTTP spec, they spelled it referrer wrong. That is to tell you, like, if you ever feel weird about your tech skills or sad, the people that designed the internet have misspellings in HTTP itself. They were no smarter than us. Like, well, maybe they're a little smarter, but it's okay. Like, there's
make me feel better. I know it's supposed
broken.
To
it all is broken.
But somehow it doesn't. Still, maybe we shouldn't debate this now. I know Krystal has a bunch of questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just think it's like nice to know that humans created this stuff. JavaScript was made in a weekend. It's not the language we want. It's just the language we have. Like, the internet is organic, and that's what's magical about it. But they're not smarter than we are.
I think the thing that makes me panic the most, the thing that makes me panic the most is, and this is actually something that I've been thinking a lot when I thinking about moving jobs and all that stuff, is that like I've been working as a front-end engineer for like a few years now, and I work in TypeScript and JavaScript and all that stuff you're talking about, but it's like I almost have worked in it for 3 years and I don't know how like HTTP protocols are made, or like I don't understand like larger architectural things, and I feel like I'm supposed to know them. So then when this question gets asked of me, I think I'm assuming the interviewer thinks I should know certain things that I don't, even though I've been working, and that's the thing that makes me worry. So like it's cool to know that something is misspelled, and it definitely helps, but it's still like I don't think that really tackles the emotion I'm feeling, like that specific feeling when I feel panic.
The way that I got over it, and I have blog posts you can find from like 15 years ago. If you Google for Hanselman imposter syndrome, like you used to find my name in the dictionary next to phony. Like that's, I feel what you're feeling.
What?
No, like seriously, like if you search for I'm a phony Hanselman, there's a whole blog about it from 20 years ago.
This guy is the internet, guys.
So the way I look at it is this, Jess. I'm driving, let's say that you are in an Uber and you're a really good Uber rider, not a driver, but you're like riding an Uber. And like someone's like, hey, Jess, can you go from point A to point B? She's done it. She's like, yeah, I'm from point A to point B. Car breaks down. Hey, could you become a mechanic suddenly and fix this car? Hey, I'm an Uber rider. I could maybe talk to you about the tire situation, but I'm not going to disassemble the car. What we do is we think about like, hey, I'm a front-end engineer. And then suddenly it's like, hey, can you design the cloud? Like, whoa,
yeah.
What I encourage people to do when they feel imposter syndrome is look one level deeper. Like my wife is a nurse and she's always coming home with like medical stuff and talking in medical terms. And I'll be like, hey, can I take Advil? Is that bad? And she's like, well, Advil is an anti-inflammatory. And suddenly we're talking about like cells. It's like, no, just can I take Advil? Is it going to mess up my liver?
Yes or no, please.
Right. Just give me a, so if you think about like, no one wants you to become a car mechanic, but if you could maybe learn to change a tire, that'd be cool. So sit down one day and just like read the HTTP spec. Don't have to understand it all. Just like familiarize yourself and you'll go, oh, 200s mean this and 300s mean that and 400s mean that. And then you'll just file it away and you'll find like when you learn a new word, you hear it. Like I learn new words a couple times a week. Someone will use a random word and I'll be like, pulchritude. I'm like, pulchritude, what the hell is that? And then it's like 3 people use that word. The same thing happens in tech. They'll teach you a little thing about HTTP and then you go off and learn that stuff. But it's the don't eat the entire elephant in one bite part.
Yeah.
Just go one layer below comfort. And if you feel uncomfortable, go back up to your layer. Does that make sense?
Easier said than done, though. I feel like.
Good advice. Good advice.
But then your level will change and then you'll go one more.
Yeah, that's the thing I've always wondered though too. It's like when you're in like that environment, like sometimes they don't give you like what scope sometimes they expect of you. And it's like if you go in and you're like, they ask you a question that just throws you off, you're like, okay, I don't know what to do with this, right? Like I just can't even understand. Like recently, like I had an interview, like I don't know how long ago, but it was like for like a full stack position. And I'm like, dude, I have 1 year of experience, but this dude was asking me like low level JavaScript stuff. And I was like, dude, I don't know I don't know the fundamentals of JavaScript like that because I've been working in Golang for a year. How would I know? The fundamentals
That's a bad interviewer,
right?
That person doesn't know how to interview.
Yeah. So it's like, I was like, wait, like, how does that line up? You know, like, even though the job is like, okay, it's for JavaScript, but it's like, I wasn't expecting those types of questions because I didn't come with that type of experience, right? So it's like, why are you going to ask me something which I don't have experience with, right? I don't know.
I totally agree. Being an interviewer requires empathy. And when you're an old head, it's really hard sometimes to like look and say, Paris is me 20 years ago. And how would I feel if someone asked me that question? Because you're proud of yourself. You're like, hey, I'm a senior engineer at whatever company. I'm going to ask a question. I hope this kid knows it. And then you also reinvent history. It's called retconning. Have you ever heard that term, retcon? That's when they take a character and like, oh, they go, oh yeah, you know, Dumbledore's always been gay. It's like, really? You know, and they just kind of like retcon the history. So people remember that like, oh yeah, when I only had 1 year of experience, I knew everything about JavaScript, Paris. I don't know why you didn't. They're remembering their own histories wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'd all be drunk right now. That's for sure.
I'm drunk, guys. So just to give context, Jess wrote in the chat, take a shot every time Scott mentions that he's older.
I apologize. I need to stop apologizing for my ancientness.
You had no say in how you got here or when you got here, so you can't apologize for being older.
It is the decision that it's the most important decision that we never make.
Facts.
But you know, they say youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, so let's I'd like to ask like what both of your like tech journeys are and how you guys got here. I guess Jess, you want to start that off?
Well, I went into tech because my mom wanted me to make money. So that's why I studied CS in college.
That's what's
Ours
Um,
up.
is like, yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
That makes makes sense
Eden,
for me too.
um, and then I think there were like periods where I really liked it, like like when I would be debugging something at like 3 a.m. in the morning and I got it. Like those were euphoric
Yeah,
moments.
I
And then
agree.
also, I think, and this is also a reason why I'm probably on TikTok now, but a lot of social media influencers that I watched inspired me a lot in tech. Like the ones that were stupid or were doing something funny with tech. I always loved that. And then I graduated and I was like, I need a job. So I interviewed furiously and I got Microsoft. And I think it wasn't until about 3 years into Microsoft, which is where I'm at now, where I started to really sit back and be like, I'm pretty content with my life, like money wise, friends wise, health wise, everything. Now I'm going to take a look at my career. And I think it was at that point where I started to post on TikTok. Um, and that's kind of where a lot of inspiration for my videos come from. Um, and also meeting like all of you people, like it's being able to talk with you and discuss a lot of stuff has helped me work through a lot of stuff in my career. um and then yeah, I mean, I've been posting about this on TikTok and I'll just say it here as well. And I think Scott knows that I was looking when I talked to him last. But my last day at Microsoft is Wednesday, and I'll be taking 2 months off, and then I accepted an offer at DoorDash starting in August. And I'll be working as a
Nice.
front-end engineer.
Congrats.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm really happy. And I think that's kind of like the first step. The micro step is just I want to try out a different company. But obviously, in the process of trying to decide if I wanted to quit, or move roles or move companies or just anything, I had to ask a lot of questions. And you know, I have a lot of goals now for like also like tech evangelism, and people like Scott are actually very inspiring, like doing what they do, educating, and also a lot of people on TikTok as well and YouTube, and kind of getting into that space has been very interesting for me. Um, and actually, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to move to a different company, because I felt like I wasn't learning enough. Like I wasn't actually like learning like enough coding in my current role, and I wanted a bigger challenge at a different company so that I can learn more and then teach more was my
Nice.
goal. um, and
Um,
then yeah.
yeah, so I
Nice,
just wanted
nice.
to touch a quick point in there. So like how was your decision process from instead of just like asking to move teams within Microsoft, because I know Microsoft's massive, right? There's anywhere you want to be, you can kind of go within the company. So like how was that decision making, like, okay, can I just move inside of Microsoft versus let me just change like my entire perspective and just move companies? Like how
Yeah,
was
that was
that?
my question too.
Yeah, actually, so last time I talked to Scott, he said that to me. He was like, before you look externally, you should look internally. He gave me recommendations of where to look for job postings within Microsoft. Um, I think for me, Microsoft is huge. And the one thing I wanted, actually, I know I'm saying I'm going to DoorDash, which is a pretty well-known company, but I actually was planning on, I was interviewing at a bunch of startups, like pre-IPO startups, because I actually wanted to try out that lifestyle, and basically do the whole like work hard but learn a lot kind of thing and wear a bunch of different hats. That was kind of my goal. I know you can definitely do that within Microsoft, within the right teams at Microsoft, but it definitely felt more like finding a needle in the haystack and kind of unsure of whether or not I would get that experience when I went in. And also, I also felt like a lot of the time I was using Microsoft as like a status for myself. Like, like for example, like one example I can remember is I was at a car rental once and I felt like they were being a little bit slow with the process. So I found a way to throw in there that I worked at Microsoft because I thought that would help. Like I feel like a lot of the time I use the fact that I work at a big company as a part of my identity, which is totally fine. But I also felt like it was a little bit destructive for my mental health when I considered like what would happen if I didn't work there, or also this idea of somehow thinking I'm better than other people just because I work at a larger company. And there are obviously a lot of perks to it, but I just wanted to try something different and see if it would change my perspective on people who work at lesser known companies, if it would change my perspective on myself, and just like have a different culture. So that was kind of my thought process there. And also, usually when you leave companies, they give you a raise. So that's also part of it. So yeah.
I don't think you moved to a smaller company by any
Yeah,
means.
it's not.
DoorDash is pretty
DoorDash is definitely not 170,000 people, though.
Yeah.
It's physically smaller.
Anything is smaller. It's definitely not a small company.
It's not small, but it's like physically smaller. Yeah.
Looks like they have 3,200 employees.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is really cool, though, about what you did, Jessica, and you should feel really good about it, is that you decided. It didn't happen. Like, it didn't happen to you. You made it happen. You were deliberate and intentional. You didn't accept the defaults. You hit custom and then decided what you were going to do. And that you should be commended for that.
Yeah, I do think a lot of the time I'm very like a flat line until I'm not. I very much I very much zone out a lot, but I think it was weird because I thought the timeline of disliking your job would take a lot longer. But I think once I started to dislike my job, it came exponentially fast, like from dislike to really, really, really didn't like it. And I think it was just, I changed rapidly. And I think it was expedited a lot by TikTok. Like a lot, just being able to talk to so many people and being on podcasts and getting like exposure to a larger world. So that expedited the process. But I think at a certain point, I really wanted the change. So I was a little bit.
That there is immediately after this podcast, I'm a flat line until I'm not merch. T-shirts.
You can take it. or Paris can take it. He has his own clothing line as well.
Yeah, Jess and I don't have our.
We're waiting for that store though. We're gonna purchase some items from Jess's store now. Can they DoorDash it to our house?
Oh, nice. Good one, Paris. Good one. So
I can hand the mic off to Scott.
Scott, your turn. I mean, I know you gave us all of the internet already, but how did you get into the tech space and then now at Microsoft?
When I graduated from high school, I was living in my parents' garage, and no one in my family had ever gone to college before, and I went and did a tour. So I went to Boston and I visited colleges. And when I got over there and I started like walking around campuses, I like had a panic attack, and I was like, I am totally not ready to go to a real school. Like, I'm sitting like on the quad of MIT or Boston College. Like, not only do I have no money, I have no emotional weight or anything to do this. So I went straight back to my parents' garage, and I was sitting there, and my buddy Jack says, "Hey, Portland Community College is doing a software engineering degree. This is the first year ever. Let's go check it out." So I went to PCC, Portland Community College, and it was $300 a class or whatever. And they were teaching C++, and Windows 3.1 was a thing. And Hello World was 93 lines of code to say Hello World, to put a box on the screen with a button that said Hello World.
It's still 93 lines in Java, by the way.
Yeah, in Java, yeah, I respect that. And software engineering is different than computer science, right? Computer science is like the science of computing, and software engineering is the practice of delivering and shipping software. So this was on the forefront of like test-driven development and unit tests and things like that we take for granted now. That stuff didn't exist. Extreme programming, agile, none of those things existed. They were just being developed. So I kind of got in on the early, and I was going to Portland Community College and living in the garage. And Oregon had a deal called the Oregon Transfer Degree. So you would get a 2-year degree and then transfer to any state school as a junior. So you save your money doing your 2 years up front. People still do that. It's a great deal.
Yeah.
So I graduated, but then I from my associates from Portland Community College, and one of the reasons that I picked that program, and I think that people should think about programs like this, is they had a guaranteed internship. Now it was like a $10 an hour kind of an internship, and I was working at Subway, and then I would go to the internship after and like write Visual Basic or whatever, and it was a car fax situation. So this is back when fax machines were a thing. So you call a human. The human would bring up some software and you'd say, can I get a Carfax on a 1998 Ford Falcon or whatever? And then they'd type it in and it would automate Microsoft Word and create a document and then print it to the fax. And then the person would get a fax of the car. And Carfax is still a thing, but this was all in the early days of Windows. So I went to work at this place as an intern. And then I remember sitting at the Subway and asking my boss for $2 more an hour. So like, that's the level of intern that we're talking about. And then a teacher came to train. We were hired to learn the new latest things. Like maybe Visual Basic 5 came out. And this trainer came from another company called Step Technology. And he would teach us stuff and it wasn't quite right. He would teach us and he'd like say the thing and I would rephrase it back to him. And I go, what I'm hearing you say is, and then I would come up with an analogy or I just, it's kind of an echoing thing. I think it's a technique. When someone tells you something technical, you rephrase it to make sure you got it. You bring it in your head, chew on it and spit it back out. And he thought I was really good at that. And I don't know, that's a talent I had. I got lucky. That's my thing, is I can make things simpler. And he said, hey, why don't you come and think about being an assistant teacher at our tech training place? And I ended up leaving the internship and going to work at a tech training place. And I taught how to make web pages when web pages just came out. And I spent the 90s flying around Intel and place and teaching them how to do ASP, classic ASP active server pages, and learning how HTML worked because people didn't know how those things were. JavaScript didn't exist. There was no JavaScript. There was just buttons and HTML. CSS didn't exist. JavaScript didn't exist. And at the same time, I was doing stand-up comedy. I was doing musical theater and stuff like that. So being a presenter and a teacher, your favorite teachers are always the really animated ones who can like do wacky stuff. So I became a pretty decent teacher, then turned into a consultant and a principal consultant, yada, 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 some non-zero number of years. I'm not allowed to say anymore because you guys are mean. And then, I
take a shot for that because
you can't take a shot for that one. It doesn't count. That was you can suck on the
non-zero number. Yeah, it could be anything.
It could be anything. Who knows, right? But had a career, did a bunch of different stuff. But I did the startup thing. I lived in Silicon Valley for a little while in the 2 bubbles ago. I think we're in the 3rd or 4th bubble now. I worked at a company called 800.com, 800.com. That's when domains were short because you could just register one. Yeah. I worked at gear.com, 4-letter domain. They became overstock.com, if you're familiar with that. So this is like pre-Amazon days. 800.com sold 3 DVDs for $1, like Columbia Records, like a club.
Yeah.
So I built like their shopping cart and we were learning how to do layouts and HTML tables and stuff like that. So just turning out the crank, doing the crank, like they would give you a pizza. We did our 60-hour weeks, all the kind of startup stuff that everyone should experience once in their life, crunch mode. And then I finally worked at a finance company making retail online banking software. And I worked my way up to chief architect and then came to work at Microsoft to do open source because I was introducing open source to banks. And then Microsoft said, hey, let's make a Ruby on Rails type application. So we made ASP.NET MVC, which I wanted to call .NET on Nails, but nobody thought that was a good idea. But that's what it was, right? And then I've been just doing open source at Microsoft ever since. And ultimately, I'm a teacher, a coder, and a kind of a failed comedian / presenter. So I'm running around like, have you heard the news? And I'm talking about all the stuff that I'm excited about.
You make so much more sense to me now that you did comedian, like you did stand up. That's insane.
Thank you.
So I wanted to touch on like your startup life for a little bit. Like, so what made you kind of transition to getting out of that? Like, did your like passion fall out of that kind of stuff, or how did that go?
Balance. I would say I was wound pretty tight. If anyone's watching this and they knew me in my 20s, they knew that I was wound pretty tight. I would say slightly on some kind of spectrum where it was like just really a little bit too Mr. Spock and really not empathetic. And a couple of different things kind of like happen, like just little moments where you reboot your entire personality. You know, I'm on like Scott 7.0 right now. You know, and I've done a lot of work in DNI, and someone said to me who I'd worked with 25 years ago, and she said, "Oh, it's so nice. It's great that you're doing all this work and you're waking up, blah, blah, blah. But, 20 years ago in the 90s when we worked together, you never invited me to lunch." That's a small statement, but it like hit me. And I was like, dude, you're right. And it wasn't gender, it wasn't age. It was just like dudes going to Red Robin. And then I realized that that was part of the problem. Like sometimes when somebody new comes to work, just come to lunch, come hang out, bring them in on your jokes, bring them in on the memes. Like inclusion is like so fundamental. And she wasn't saying like you suck and you were part of the problem. She was saying you weren't part of the solution. And that was like a reboot moment for me. And it's like, I was just living. And then I stopped the defaults. I started going deliberately, like, what am I doing? Is this a year I'm going to get experience, or is this a year I'm just going to like let happen? So you guys are teasing me about my number of years experience, but about 7 years of that, I don't even count those years because they just happened. So as many times as you can, stop. It might maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Do you ever like drive? Anyone here drive, Paris? Krystal?
Yeah, I drive all the time. Yeah.
Have you ever been driving and you're driving and then you're like, oh crap, I'm driving. And you're like,
yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
You're not tuned in. You're
you just like went like 9 blocks and you're like, I don't even remember. And the car even like does the little shake.
That happens with the whole drive for me sometimes. I drive like 40 minutes and I'm like, I don't know how I got here,
Don't lose years. That will happen. You will lose a whole year and you'll say, wow, like if I'm intellectually honest with myself, I didn't learn anything this year. So then people will gatekeep and they'll tell you, I got 20 years experience, Paris. I got 30 years experience. How many years? Was it the same year 20 times? Or was it like new and fresh and interesting and stuff like that? So like Jess is saying, I'm tired and I'm not learning and I'm going to do something about it. She could phone it in another 4 years and then go, but she's taken the move. So anytime, and this happens to me, by the way, a couple times a week, where I'm just like, okay, it's Monday. What's going to make this week awesome? What can I do? Is it going to be a food thing, or can I go for a walk or get more sunshine? It's just small little intentional things to decide that you're going to live. That caused me to be more thoughtful about other people's feelings and how I want to do things. So then I decided that I'm actually a teacher who codes and works at Microsoft.
Yeah.
It's a little rambly, but you get the idea, I hope.
Yeah, definitely. I think
Jess, you raise your hand on purpose.
Yeah.
No, I feel bad because I think I messed up the order that you guys set up.
He's a teacher, guys. You need to raise your hand.
I don't want to interrupt, but actually I have this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and other people have asked me too, is assuming that you decide at some point in your life that you want to have impact on people, and then there's so many ways to do it, right? Like you do it through podcasts and TikTok and making videos and a lot of content, but also being a stand-up comedian is another way to do it. Like you could, there are people in stand-up comedy who talk about tech, and then there's also a lot of other ways to do it. I mean, a lot of your content is very genuine and informational, and then you also interview a lot of people, right? But you can also be somebody who has this persona of swearing every 5 words and just being, I don't know, you could have different, sorry, how do I phrase
like a Gary Vee or something?
Like Gary, you could have different ways of being, right? You could be a comedian, you could be really aggressive, you could be very genuine, you could be or even different formats. Stand-up comedy is one of them. You could, Lin-Manuel Miranda teaching us about Hamilton, you could write a musical, and there are obviously so many ways of doing it. And that's one question that I had is I'm having for myself right now, is if I wanted to invest in a skill, right? Like, how do you know which one you wanted to do? Did you fall into it, like podcasting and interviewing people? Is that where you really enjoyed spending your time and got the most value out of it? And do you also think that's the best way to impact people? Probably because it impacts you more, so therefore you feel like it'll impact other people. But I'm just curious what your thought process on that is, because
Cool.
I have a lot of questions around it.
No, it's good. Let's talk about them. So first, yeah, I could be Gary Vee, I could be aggressive, I could be, you know, I find that off-putting. I find that to be the opposite of genuine. You know, swearing in punctuation for swearing's sake, it doesn't make it more impressive. I see those kind of people simply making declarative statements that are controversial so that they can do that. My whole vibe is be the change that you want to see. If you want to see inclusion, you want to see positivity, then be inclusive and positive. I wanted to, everyone does something for selfish reasons, right? You do things because it works for you. If someone does something, whether they hurt your feelings or they do something that you don't like them doing, they did it because it worked for them. They didn't do it on accident. They did it. They decided to do it. I started to go to user groups and give talks. And after the user groups, people would say, oh man, I can use that thing that you showed me right now. You made an impact in my life. And I was like, oh, I should probably write that down. Then people started emailing me and I would just send them a link to the thing I just wrote. So then I was like, oh, it's way better to like write a blog than to randomly email people stuff. Like Paris emails me after, like, hey, great job, I have a question. Paris seems cool, but I'm not going to like write it 12 pages and give it to him for free, but I'm not going to charge him. So I'll make a blog post and then I'll send him a link to the blog. And then I'll go to sleep and 100 people will read the blog post. And I'm like, ooh, I impacted people. And then a couple of times a week, someone will email me and say, hey, I got a job. And, you know, I Googled your blog post and it's great and it helped me. That's the drug. Teachers do it so that when they're old, people will like graduate and they'll say, you are the best teacher ever. I love you so much. Like that's why teachers do that, to see that people succeed. So my whole jam is send the ladder back down. I did it. I'm great. Now let's bring as many people up the ladder as possible.
So, Scott, I guess I want to ask you the cliche question. So I know like as human beings, like we have multiple interests, and like me, myself, I know like I have like interest in so many different things. Like I like making video content. I like being a software engineer. I like trying to build a startup. I want to kind of start a YouTube channel in the future, right? So it's like, I kind of want to do all these things. I have this podcast, right? Like, how did you figure out like, oh, you really like teaching and you wanted to go that way versus just staying more of the traditional route and just being a software engineer, putting your head down and just pumping out code?
Have you ever had a video or a TikTok or a podcast stuck inside you and you couldn't do anything but think about it for days until you finally got it out?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Then now you know why we do these things. The trick is though, and I had an interesting conversation with someone earlier today who wanted to know why they couldn't just be a content creator. It's like, well, what does that even mean? Like influencer, content creator, like you're just going to be like Mr. Beast, or like even worse, Mr. Beast's friends. Like they're famous because they're Mr. Beast's friends. Like, what's your thing? Like, are you better because we know you? Are you a Kardashian? Like what is your thing? Mm-hmm. Are you a teacher? Are you an empowerer? Like Gary Vee, at least he's trying to make other millionaires, right? Yeah. Like you can't just be. You have to know who you are without social media. Like social media has to not exist. You need to stay off of it for a month and figure out who you are without the likes. Yeah. Then the likes amplify the thing that you're excited about. Mm-hmm. So then take the thing you want to do. Thank you, Jess, for the snaps. Then take the thing you want to do, sort by impact.
Yeah.
And do those things first. You listed out a bunch of things to do. You're going to probably either do none of them or you're going to do a bunch of them poorly.
Yeah.
Figure out 2 or 3, sort by impact, do those first.
Okay.
I think Paris is going to become a teacher because he's been wanting to like make a course for kids that ask him. So this is really good for him.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But like sprint, like organized sprints, like Usain Bolt doesn't run and text. He does one thing, he picks the direction and he runs.
Usain Bolt runs and then taunts his competitors from
after he's done running and after he did a good job.
Even during his run, right? He's 10 feet ahead of everybody.
But you got to be that good. You gotta, one of my favorite tech sprinters is Saran Yitbarek, who made codenewbies.org.
Yeah.
And what's great about Saran is that she's the perfect example of that friend who doesn't hang out. And you're like, where's Saran? She haven't seen her in like 2 weeks. And then she comes back and she's like written a book, or she like made a video. And you're like, what were you doing? We were all hanging out. Like, oh, well, I was doing a thing. So what she'll do is she'll disappear for weeks at a time, and then she'll pop up with a new idea or an app or a course or something amazing, because doing stuff is the opposite of hanging out. If you're like hanging out with your friends, going to the club, hanging out, like, oh yeah, why are you here complaining about the thing you're not doing? Take a break, do the thing, then come back. Now, I'm not in any way advocating for like hustle culture. Like, oh, if you didn't do a startup during the pandemic, you're not trying hard enough. I'm saying work hard, play hard, like do the thing and then come back. So sprint, set up like a week, Paris, and like dedicate yourself to doing the thing you want to do. Take a break. Like I won't blog for a week and I'll do a YouTube. And then I'll just wait until I feel the next thing. Like I haven't done a TikTok in like 4 days. I could get all in a twist about it. Like, what about my audience? What about my people? Like, they're probably cool without me. That's not feeding my spirit right now. I'm excited about my blog. And sprint, as opposed to kind of like do a little crappy.
Yeah, like being shoddy in every direction, right?
Yes,
like
yes. Don't be mediocre in everything. Yeah, so I like run 100 yards and then I stop.
Yeah, got it.
I love that. I feel like that's how I run.
That was super helpful.
Yeah, I run like that anyway. I only run like 50 yards. One of my best TikToks, I'm like on my treadmill, I'm like huffing away like an old man on a treadmill giving
I
advice.
saw that was good.
Wait, which one is that one?
If you scroll back to my early work on the top.
Oh, the early ones.
It's like
early work.
Yeah, it's basically old guy on a 10
treadmill. Years ago. No, just kidding.
Because I'm multitasking, right? I'm like, I'm on this stupid thing. I might as well do something about it.
Oh my gosh. In 10 years, if TikTok is still a thing and you say, go back and watch my early work, they would be scrolling for days.
I need playlists. Can someone just give me freaking TikTok playlists? I've got 30 days of C#.
So many people have the feature already. I don't have the feature. No, I don't have it either. Can we
verify us, please?
Yeah.
I thought you would, Scott, because you have a lot of followers.
No, I applied and they said no.
Oh, you apply?
What do you need to be verified?
This is a whole secret thing I'll tell you about later.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, there's a thing.
I didn't know.
You gotta know a guy.
I didn't know that there's a secret thing.
You go to this Italian restaurant and there's a guy with like a little nameplate.
There is always a guy.
It's a guy or gal.
So
he's like, oh, I verify you.
Didn't know somebody? Because that's a thing.
Well, it's like Twitter verification. It's all like press and stuff. I don't know anyone and I don't have any hookup. So therefore, like I've been trying to verify myself on Instagram for like a year. You go into the app, you go into settings, you send them a picture of your driver's license and they tell you that you suck. And then you feel bad. And I've been doing that for 5 years on Instagram.
Persistence. Keep going.
Yeah, sometimes I've heard it's just like someone at the company needs to know who you are or something. And then you get verified. I don't know.
I used to have a Wikipedia. They deleted it. So, life, it doesn't matter.
So Scott, I have a couple questions from our Discord that we have.
Are they listening to us right now?
No, but I asked if they had any questions for you earlier. And there's a kid. So this is a kid named Will. He's a 14-year-old prodigy. He is like he is like so talented. His GitHub is already stacked.
Shout out to Will.
Shout out to Will. He's in Portland himself, and he asked, "What's your favorite coffee shop in Portland?"
Dead Stock Coffee on 3rd and Cooch. Tell Ian that Scott says hi.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Damn,
Even
Scott has to like
even knows the dude that works there.
Ian used to be a Nike shoe designer and has turned Dead Stock Coffee into a coffee shop / shoe museum with sneakers and designs and Yeezys on the wall. And he is actually on Third and Cooch, right below Pensole Shoe Academy, where some of the world's great shoe designers have come out, because Portland is the home of Nike World Headquarters.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so Dead
Yeah,
Stock Coffee is
I've
the answer
never-
for our friend.
Awesome.
Dang.
I think this was a troll question, but I'm gonna ask you anyway.
Of course, that's a
what are
great.
your
great opening.
thoughts on Swift?
It's a language.
Got that?
I mean,
Okay,
you
that
want a
was,
troll answer, right? I mean,
I think he was looking for a troll answer. That was perfect. So yeah, I think that's the end of that, because I realized the other one was already answered. So Scott, you're like 792 episodes deep in Hansel Minutes.
yes, I have a
How
podcast
the
that everyone should listen to.
How the heck do you do it once a week, once a month?
Every Thursday.
What
For
the
the
heck?
last, I don't know what year. Episode 1 was January 11th, 2006.
Damn.
What episode are we on? We're like on
Episode 793
You're like
comes out
13.
this
We're on-
Thursday.
yeah, we're on episode 13.
This
Yeah,
is
my
ep-
other podcast is like on 108. So
That's pretty sweet. Listen, there was an article, I think in the New Yorker, about how the internet is littered with podcasts that make it 9 episodes. Because what happens is people think that their conversations with their friends is so clever that we'll just get some wine and we'll start a podcast and we're going to be famous and then we'll sell it to Gimlet Media. And it's
Yeah.
not. It
Just to
takes work.
attack.
It takes research and effort. You got to do the work, right?
It
You
does.
gotta
It
do
takes
the
a lot
work.
of effort. Yeah.
Yeah. So
feel
people give up.
attacked.
People listen, I thought it was that way too. I've had 4 different podcasts, right? Like I used to do one with my friend Lovey, who has she's got a New York Times bestselling book. I had a show called Ratchet and the Geek. And we would get together every week and talk about, pop culture and stuff like that. But like editing and uploading and all that kind of stuff, it's hard. It's hard work to do a podcast.
Yep.
So what happens is people set themselves up for failure. They create failure systems, and it's like, yeah, we're going to podcast twice a week. Okay, once a week. No, once a month. How about quarterly? Hey, are you in town? Like, and then you don't do the show ever again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you set
Yeah.
a system up that's going to make you successful, so you won't
Right.
ever burn out.
Do you I know you have Azure Fridays as well.
Mhm.
Is that still a podcast that's going on now, or
Yeah, it's a video cast. I've done 650 episodes.
Dang.
Go to
Holy
azurefriday.com or you can go
That's
to
crazy.
friday.azure.com. I also did a show called This Developer's Life that you should check out. That was pretty hot.
This
nice?
developer's life.
Thisdeveloperslife.com.
Yeah.
I had to stop doing that show because one of my favorite episodes of This Developer's Life, and I say that in like when you do something awesome that you can like be proud of it and like own it and say like this was awesome. So I'm being egotistical about the show. The last episode I did, season 4, episode 1, was on this woman Samus, who is a first-gen immigrant. Her parents are, I want to say, from West Africa. I don't remember the country. She was getting a PhD from Cornell while simultaneously doing a rap career. Trying
Damn.
to
That's
explain that to
crazy.
her, like
Wow.
her immigrant parents, like,
Wait,
like, do I drop out? You ever seen her live?
no, I think I've seen her. Doesn't she have a TED Talk?
I don't know. She has a giant arm cannon from from the movie, the TV show, the game Metroid. You ever,
Oh, okay.
Her name Samus comes from Metroid.
Okay,
And-
I'll check it out.
Well, long story short, Metroid is a Nintendo game, and there's this
Yes.
little person who comes out and they fight the mother brain, and it's a whole thing. And at the very end of the game, after you play for like 40 hours, Samus takes off their helmet, and it's a girl. And it was like the moment of the 80s. Like people lost their minds. Like dudes were like, I've been playing this video game for 40 hours and it's a girl. And all the women were like, oh my God, I'm playing this video game for hours, it's a girl. She got a giant arm cannon. So
Yeah.
Samus changed her rap name is Samus, Sammus. And she's got some really great, she's a generalized musician, but she had a nerdcore album. Like she had one called
Nice.
1080p. She had a song called Cybernetic Armor, Power Ups. Absolutely amazing. I'll put some in the chat. So when I discovered her, I'm like, this is about the coolest person that I've ever seen. I'm going to go and do an episode of a podcast, but it involved talking to her for hours, building out a story arc, and then creating musical cues in the background that like swell when she says something. Like it was like NPR level stuff.
Oh wow.
And it was unbelievably hard. And I was like, I'm gonna have to quit my job if I'm ever gonna get like this good. So we had to stop doing that show because it was like 40. I think I spent 43 hours editing Amis's video.
Wow.
It was nuts.
Oh wow. That's crazy.
Like I'm not joking. It was that hard. Here's
Yeah.
Amis's thing here in the chat. Anyway, yeah. So like that was an example of like I would love to quit my job and do that show, but I would need a staff of like interns.
Yeah.
That's possible.
That's free.
Are you
I mean,
free?
you have TikTok to recruit for intern positions.
Yeah.
But you got to pay interns. You got to pay the interns.
I'll do it for free.
Oh, do it for the exposure.
Before we wrap up, do you both have anything you want to drop or promo?
Watch Jess's TikToks.
Watch TikToks. Watch all of our TikToks.
Watch all of our TikToks, yes.
Yes. Check
Please,
out.
please.
Honestly, I would say I promote my podcast because it's never won an award. It's never been a top 10 list of anything. Like there's two dudes on Skype talking about JavaScript is always the top 10 podcast on the planet or whatever. But I've been quietly putting out fresh faces for 15 years, and I think you should check it out. And it's also got transcripts and it's searchable.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Definitely check out Jess's links. We'll put them in the description. Check out Scott's links. We'll put those in the description. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Thanks, Scott. Really insightful stuff. And thanks, Jess, for sharing your stories and everything. Really appreciate it.
We got the history of the internet today as well.
Yeah.
So that was a bonus.
Well, we also got the hookup at DoorDash now.
Back.
Yeah.
I mean, Jess,
I
I
want-
literally
For real.
keep DoorDash in business. So like you're
DoorDash,
welcome for the job.
DoorDash takes forever to deliver. But I have this like image in my head of, do you guys know like Justin Timberlake's and Jimmy Fallon's like history of dance like thing where they go through all the dance moves?
That was actually a ripoff of an early meme on the history of dance.
I think I know what video you're talking about, but it would be so cool if like Scott get on Jimmy Fallon or some late night show and like somehow do some sort of like timeline of the internet, but like in dance.
That would be amazing.
That'd be sick. That'd be sick.
It would be
We gotta create a petition for that.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Spicy history of the internet. All right, I'll get on that right away.
Thank you guys again for joining.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.